Good evening. Welcome to Maryville Cares. I am Amy Kendal, the administrator here at Maryville for family-based community services, and I'm really delighted to have a conversation today with our Director of Information Technology, John Falsetti. Welcome, John.
Hi, Amy. Thank you.
And we have been having some conversations regarding this new concept in our world called artificial intelligence. And there's no better person within our organization right now to lead us in a discussion today about artificial intelligence, which other people are also calling AI. So to start us out, John, maybe you could give us an overview of what is AI?
Sure. There's a lot of definitions of it, but in general, artificial intelligence is sort of what we're used to as far as doing searches on the internet and things of that sort and getting some results back. Where artificial intelligence take it to a new level. And let me just give a brief overview of what that means. So let's say machine learning, there's another term with that, and there's also kind of like the decision tree that machines make, machines being computers. So before it was more like and if kind of statements. So if this is asked, then do this, and so forth and so on. And it's sort of scripted, even though it looks like it's not. Where AI itself works on a set of rules to follow and not necessarily scripted responses. Even if they're complex scripted responses, they work more on like rules. So for example, I'm going to just give you an example of how we use artificial intelligence where we work. All right, so we have some security software that constantly scans our information coming in and out of our organization. And the rules are that if there's anything out of the ordinary, start flagging it. So in other words, let's say, Amy, I was sending you a report every month, and the report had a Word document attached to it. And then 1 month came around where I send you the exact same email, but it has an Excel document attachment. It would flag it saying this is an anomaly. And that's not something that's scripted. It just learned our behavior. And the rules are we're trying to keep people safe by not having bad emails come through. And this is where AI, after, it takes like 6 or 8 weeks for the system to actually learn individually how we use the internet and how the organization uses it. So, for example, it may be where I send you it and I send you it. And then I really want to send the next month I want to send it to you and 25 other people. It'll say, no, that's not real. You know, we're gonna hold this back until it's actually confirmed. So that's a real life example of how we use artificial intelligence now. So it's sort of more rules instead of scripted. And the technology itself is advancing as we speak. And not that I want to get too deep in the weeds on kind of the geeky part of it, but you're going to hear a new term called quantum computing. And right now, IBM and Google and a couple other companies are putting a lot of money into it. And this is going to add the speed for AI. It's really built for AI itself. And an example of what quantum computing will do. Right now, what computers do is when they're sending a bit of information over, it's 1 bit at a time, and then it collects it together at the end and gives you the result. What quantum computing does is it does all of that simultaneously. So an analogy would be if you hit the C note on a piano, that's the 1 bit that comes across. And quantum computing uses what they call qubits, and that'd be like hitting a whole C chord, and that instantaneous comes across even though it's a bunch of individual notes. So instead of it taking all these individual notes, it does that. So long story short, once this comes around, and quantum computers do exist, but they're really pretty much in the research realm. In the next 10 years, we're going to see this, and then that's where AI is really, really going to start taking form in like robotics and things of that sort.
And I think, you know, you're leading us to what we can even expect in the future. And I think maybe we can talk a little bit about our current applications, what we're starting to see now, just like in the last year, different applications. Maybe you can give us a rundown on applications that we can, if we haven't seen already, we'll be seeing them very soon.
Okay, so So, for example, we were talking about how students use them to create their content and things of that sort. That's kind of a double-edged sword, right? So you could ask AI. They call it ChatGPT. We've all heard about that. You could get an account and just use your Google account and use it. And I would encourage people to try it out. Where that's before you could research things and get some information back, but ChatGPT, you could say, could you just create a job description for this type of person in this kind of environment, and it would come back with something that kind of makes sense. You got to read it because it's not 100%, but try it. It'll work. If there's somebody in your family that's sort of known, but not known like Barack Obama's known, just known, let's say, in their certain industry, you could ask ChatGPT to do a bio on that person. It'll come back with stuff. Even though, let's say that person's only known in the pinball industry. No, really.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm using this as an example because my wife's uncle is actually like the guru. Nobody knows him, but except in that. And I tried it out, and it was about 75% accurate.
Wow.
So those are the types of things that AI is starting to do, along with other mechanical stuff, like I mentioned earlier, like for security and things of that sort. So as you could see, this kind of power that it gives you could also, you have to be careful with it, because not only of its accuracy, but it sort of leads you down, depending on what you're asking, it just makes some assumptions of what you're looking for, and sometimes could bring you down a path that you probably shouldn't be on, especially for our younger folks.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about as I've started to look at this is it's almost like its own, well, like an encyclopedia, that it can give you a lot of information. But one of the things that you mentioned the other day was, well, where are the resources, or how did you get that information? I was in a conversation with my neighbors yesterday, and they were quoting some numbers about something in politics. I don't remember the details, but the first thing the person responded to is, well, where did you get that? Where did you get those numbers from? Because then that was going to, maybe help the conversation or change the way that person was going to respond. But how do we figure this out, John, in terms of, I mean, you said, try it out, or I know we were talking a little bit about speakers, like where you can ask a question and you'll get the answer. So that's a little bit of a form of AI in the background.
Right. So if for using it and seeing, in other words, what's the accuracy, right, of what you're getting back, luckily we still you have to do work, all right, to make sure it's correct, right? So let's say you're doing something on the Civil War, right, something that's clearly documented, and you have publishing like Encyclopedia Britannica, which is still alive and well. That's something that we still considered a source that did their homework. So if, let's say, you're doing a paper on a certain aspect of the Civil War and you're asking a particular questions about maybe generals that were in it or whatever it may be, and it comes back with it, it could give you the framework. That's the nice thing, right? So it could actually, all right, it puts a framework around it, but you have to go through and, for lack of better words, proofread it, not for grammar, but for accuracy. And that's when you're going to have to do some homework. But that's the positive thing about AI, is it could give you some framework, but you have to get some trusted sources, whether it's you think the Washington Post is trusted, or Encyclopedia Britannica, or C-SPAN.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because really, as an organization that works with children and families, the reason that we really wanted to talk about this is, how does this affect children, and how is this going to be, what can parents consider when they're looking at these different aspects of AI that is going to be, and has already been introduced to their children, probably more so than us in some cases, depending on, what their school environment is and how innovative their technology is and practices. The American Academy of Pediatrics is starting to look at this, as well as many other social media groups that are really looking at the safety and well-being of children. And you're talking a little bit about, maybe we can talk about the benefits and maybe the cons. I mean, what the benefit is, you're going to get this framework that you talked about if you're going to do a report. Another benefit is it's pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
Another benefit might be that it gives you information that you weren't thinking of, so it allows you to get more creative with a subject. What would some cons be to this type of situation?
Well, the cons could be how you're using it, right? So, but let's take let's say you're using it for quote unquote legitimate stuff. You're doing some research for school or for work and things of that sort. The cons are you just can't trust the whole thing and you have to do some work, kind of what we talked about before. But the good part is that, you do have a framework to work with, like we talked about before. But what we really have to worry about with our kids is, just like anything else, that if you're asking the internet for information, and it's no different than what we were doing before, but just now we have this AI tool that has access to every single bit of public information, period, almost instantaneously. And it pulls on that. Remember I talked about earlier about that, it's just going on rules? So if somebody asks it, let's say, how could I get a date for Friday night? Look out. It may come back saying, well, I got a date for you, So, there's some common sense and there's definitely some dialogue that has to happen between parents and their kids and the entire family about kind of the officer-friendly thing, right? In the beginning, what we had was so similar when we were younger. Where now, we have to show that when you're asking questions, you have to be very careful that this entity on the other side really doesn't have your good or any good or bad intentions. It's just pulling on this wealth of information. And when it prompts you saying, yeah, I've got a date for you for Friday night, why don't you click here and see what it's all about? You've released some information that's going to always be out there too.
Well, and that's a really good example. And the other interesting thing that some early studies have done with young children in AI is that young children, are curious-minded. That's the way we want them to be. And they're very open to sharing. So they may be sharing private information that maybe that's what we think is private, but they're just kind of putting it out there. The other thing that they have sort of found is that AI seems to be like a real person. You go to a store now online and it'll have the little chat box in the corner and it'll say, oh, do you have a question about buying a refrigerator? And so you can tap into that and the question, is that a real person or not?
Right.
And so that's still happening for children in the context of for games or other information. So they're kind of looking at that might be a real person on the other side, which it could be or it may not. And they're also finding that they trust AI more than humans, meaning, so if you say, what year did the Civil War start, it's going to tell you the year. But if you asked me today, I don't know that I'd have that exact date.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden that
point.
seems to be more trusted than maybe the conversation that I would be able to share about my knowledge of the Civil War and the information that I received about that that.
I guess it's that instant gratification era, right? Where you don't have to put a whole lot of work into to get some information. And that's good, but you can't really trust the information as if the old days when you went to the library and you opened up the Encyclopedia Britannica and looked it up.
Well, and I think, I think a main point here is that just like any new dynamic of technology, even years ago when people started to give their children cell phones, there was going to be safeguards and limitations on what that was going to look like. And then it was, well, we're going to give you the phone, it's going to be used at a certain time, and we're going to put safeguards in the software, so there's safety issues. And then now it seems like there's just going to be another layer on, so now AI is incorporated in it, what's real and what's not, and how is this to be used? So there has to be the issue of ethics and just the dynamics of what's okay and what's not okay. As you mentioned earlier, a family needs to come up with some ground rules for usage.
Just engaging it, period.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other part of it, the stuff that we don't have control over our kids, is some of the bullying that's been happening for years. And we've found it, it started with texting with cell phones, right? Because they're removed. But now with the AI, you could manipulate pictures of your classmates in a way that, you're just making fun of them. And maybe some people think it's funny, but it's not. And that gets put out on the internet. And now the bullying isn't just texting. It's these visuals that go along with it. And that's something that on a community level, and I'm hoping at a policy level in our government, that we could harness that a little bit. I'm hoping that school boards take that stuff very, very seriously, just like any other bullying. And there's ramifications for it. So that's the other part of it, that no matter how much we talk to our family, maybe we could talk, if something like this happens to one of you and your friends, you have to say something right away.
Well, yeah, that's a great message. And just the idea that it can really erode somebody's privacy. And what does privacy mean, particularly when it comes to children under the age of 18? And there is some policies being looked at right now in terms of safeguarding that type of information specifically for young children. That isn't actually in place yet, but
Right.
Everything's moving so fast. That's how they're being able to see these examples. For example, people reaching out to children selling things, whether that's to buy an extra game or 99 cents for a new app, all those things that they can tap into pretty quickly. That is now sort of a new feature on the computer that they don't really know what to do with that.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So between selling you more stuff and taking all your items that you put out on the public internet, and anything, by the way, you do with ChatGPT or Garb is the one from Google, that is by default open to the public. So anything you put out there, even if you're saying, well, the results of this, I'm going to just put it in a private chat or a private Facebook group, it's already gone. And the other AI generators have access to that information. So it's sort of complicated when you think about all the avenues that this stuff could kind of invade our privacy. And I know we're just talking right now about all the negative stuff of it, but it's important with our kids. So like anything else, you have to assume whatever you put out there is for consumption of the entire world.
Well, and another dynamic that whatever information's out there can be replicated. And when it comes to children, it can also replicate issues that are hateful and show prejudice and all those type of dynamics that can really have a huge impact on, obviously our society. But again, today we're sort of looking at it from the framework as a parent and as anybody working with children. How do we safeguard this in a way that's productive and use it as a learning tool? Because it really can allow for a lot of wonderful creativity. And the conversation that you and I might have 5 years from now is going to be much
That's for sure.
robust in terms of what has happened. Even as we speak, so many things are happening, and companies and education systems are trying to really figure out how can they use this tool in a productive way for us to be, a safe, good society. And that's where there's dangers. And so looking at that and knowing it is the most important thing, is to be informed. And that's kind of why we wanted to have this conversation today, just a basic awareness that this is coming, it is here, and let's learn about it. Let's start asking more questions because we want to be aware of the strength of what is around our children. And, what else tidbits that we could say to our network out here?
I would say that this is something that just search for it. It's going to be part of our lives whether we like it or not. And it's going to be a good part of our lives in a lot of instances. So, for example, to kind of just say some of the other applications, they're using AI, and this quantum AI stuff that we talked about earlier is really going to come into play for, let's say, radiologists. All right. So right now they're looking at digital representations of images, right? And that's a computer representation. In AI, they're really, really training to what is the norm, right? For, let's say, a MRI of the chest, right? Or the heart. And because they have the wealth of all the information that's out in the world, and they put some rules around it, they're going to be able to look at these images much faster and more accurately and find maybe some other stuff that the doctor isn't focusing on. Let's say the doctor's focusing on the thickness of wall in one of the chambers of the heart. But AI could find out that, down the line here a little bit, there seems to be some blockage. I'm just using it as an example. But that's because it's going to know everything about the anatomy and what it should be in a perfect case. So I'm using that as, that's why AI is not going away, because the enormity of that and the positiveness of that is huge. But on the other hand, what we were talking about, that AI is also going to be used on an individual level to sell them stuff. And to open it up to sell you stuff is opening up to some items that could go down the wrong path, right? So for example, if you're a connoisseur of guns and you like all kinds of guns from the Civil War era and things of that sort, and you start asking it these questions, that's something right there could go either way. We all know it, right? So as a young person asking those questions, you got to be very careful with it and just talk to our kids, right?
Well, we're going to be wrapping up here in about 3 minutes, but I think just like anything regarding parenthood, part of our responsibility is being there to guide, to give them information, and to use the resources that we have, and to be continual, ongoing learners ourselves. Even the teachers in grammar schools and high schools and universities, they're trying to figure out how they're going to negotiate all of this in their environments. I mean, you're bringing up about x-rays. Well, my next thing is, well, how are they going to teach our future doctors in medical school? That will be a different way of learning how to be a doctor, and how are you going to manage what's going to be a priority. And so as parents, just like any other subject or issue and there are many that parents are dealing with on a daily basis, technology and the issue of AI and what your children are looking at, whether it's on the TV or the tablet or what they're seeing outside, we are the trusted individuals to help them negotiate what that's all about, what's true, what's not true. How can we nurture the values of our own family, although they're going to see other things. And that's where part of our responsibility really lies in this particular issue. I would recommend that there are some resources that are out there, as I said earlier. healthychildren.org, which is part of American Academy of Pediatrics, has some good information and some websites specifically designed to talk about AI and different social media issues regarding children, because it's constantly ongoing. And it's okay to look at these things to figure out what movies kids could see or how you put the privacy on your phone. And any other suggestions that you can think of, John?
just to kind of build on what you just said. You know, this is different than when we, for the last 200 years, right? Don't talk to strangers. Probably 3,000 years, right? You know, make sure you're walking with a group if it's late at night. That stuff hasn't changed. But this is one of the things that we're going to be riding this bike as we're building it, right? Because us as parents, it's so new and so invasive and moving so fast that for us to keep up with that curve so we could translate it to our kids in something that they could understand is going to be tough. So it's going to take some work on our part.
Well, and you're not alone. I mean, we're just having this initial conversation, but you know, talk to people, talk to other parents. What are they experiencing? There's PTAs out there. Maybe start bringing this up to the teachers. You know, just inquiring about this is very critical, because then that gets everybody starting to talk about what are our options? What can we do to help our children thrive and our families feel more confident about how they address these issues? Because you know, some of the issues are sensitive and they may be uncomfortable, but we want families to feel confident and secure and know that there are resources out there. And we're just so grateful for your time. And John, as
thank
always,
you so much, Amy.
Your time here is quite valuable to this topic. And we welcome you to come back again next month to Maryville Cares. And we wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much.